all well. My name is Ria Ratan and I am one of the early careers recruiters at Marsh McLennan. You can see that we've also got Jennifer and Abby here as well, who are from Mercer, who will be joining us and going through the webinar today. So I'll give a brief introduction before we get started. So just bear with me 1 second. So firstly, welcome everyone to the Skills Workshop Virtual Careers Fair. I'm sure some of you have been here before as well and followed the programme since June. So if you are familiar with this, then welcome back. And if this is anyone's first time, then welcome to you as well. So hopefully we're going to use this session to give you an insight into the skills, the knowledge, etc. that you need to prepare for a career within asset management. All of our sessions are free to register. All of the details will be put in the chat box as well. And all of the information that you need to know, etc., will also be in the chat box. So today we are providing you with an overview of Mercer. So how this session will be run is we will give you an introduction of our firm, talk about what we do, the different areas of our business. Abby will be touching on the programme side of things and the application process, how you can apply. We'll also provide all the links, etc., to the roles that are available. The deadline and other useful information that you need to sort of stand out in your application. And then Jennifer will also go through the graduate side and provide her input and her insight as well into her experiences. So shortly, I will hand it over to Jennifer and Abby to introduce themselves. But a quick reminder that obviously this is a webinar, so although we can't see your faces, please use the question and answer function to ask us any questions. I will try and get through as many of them as I can, but I will also note them down. So if for any reason I can't reach all of your questions, we will try and get back to you as soon as possible. But Abby, if you wanted to introduce yourself first.
Sure. So hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining. I am the Early Careers Recruiter at Mercer for our intern placement and graduate recruitment. As Ria mentioned, I'll be talking through a really quick overview of the company, touching on our application process, the programs that we offer, and also some hints and tips on your applications.
Thank you. And Jennifer?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen. I'm one of the most recent grad intakes from Mercer, so I started in September 2019 in the Wealth Academy, and I'll just go over sort of how I applied and sort of what I did that might help when you're applying, and then what I've done in the last 2 and a wee bit years in the role, so you know what to expect.
Perfect, thank you, Jen. Abby, if you wanted to start with the Mercer overview, etc.
Perfect. So I'm just going to pull up some slides, so hopefully everybody will be able to see those. You just bear with me for a moment. Perfect. Is that showing correctly for everybody? Yeah. Great. So yeah, as I mentioned, what I'm going to touch over, I appreciate you want to leave time for questions at the end. So I won't spend too long on this and then give you the opportunity to ask exactly what you want to find out. Just to kind of get started. So we'll be talking around what Mercer is, what we do. However, just to put this in context, Mercer is part of Marsh McLennan, which is our wider family kind of company. And within that, we have 4 different opcos. So we have Marsh, Guy Carpenter, Oliver Wyman, and Mercer. Today, we'll be focusing on Mercer. However, if you do want information on any of the other opcos, then please do visit our website where you'll be able to find that. So just to introduce you to what we do at Mercer. So Mercer is a global consulting leader, and we have 3 main areas. These are health, wealth, and career. And we specialize in these particular areas. So we have programs that you can apply to either go into health, career, or wealth. Mercer is our biggest, is the biggest pension consulting firm. And we're in the business of creating more secure and rewarding futures for clients and their employees. So we'll just touch really quickly to kind of overview what each of the three do. And then as Jen works in wealth, when she comes on to her bit, she can talk to you a little bit more about what wealth do and also the graduate program as well. So just to start with health, I'm sure you can all see the information there, and I'm sure we can share a copy of this slide afterwards if that would be helpful. But health consultants help employers control healthcare costs while providing employee choice. So it's looking at the sorts of health benefits that companies would give to their employees, looking to educate and motivate employees to take accountability for their health. And basically the aim of this is to attract and retain key talent within companies. So Mercer will advise companies on the best way to do this. We've then got career, which focuses on workforce strategies. So it's advising companies on the best way to look after their employees, kind of through executive rewards, mobility, communication, change management. So this is looking at consulting through more of a HR sort of lens. So if that's something you're interested in, then that may be an area that you'd like to get into. And then we have wealth, and wealth is all around financial security. So providing customized advice to help clients make and implement better decisions. So a lot of the work around here is on retirement and pensions and investment strategies as well. So that's just a really quick overview, and apologies for my explanations. However, I'm not an expert on all three of those. So you'll definitely find out more information if you take a look on our website, and also I'm sure Jen will be able to help with some of the wealth questions you may have. We do also have a couple of events coming up that we'll be running where we will talk about these in more detail as well. So if you're interested in attending those, then I believe the links for those will be shared at the end of this session as well. The opportunities that we have in the company include insight weeks, internships, placement years, and graduate. So insight weeks are for those in their first year of university. And this is a week-long kind of insight into the company, which usually takes place in the springtime, so March and April sort of time. And we are hopeful that this year we'll be able to do this in person, not virtual. And you'd basically come into the company, you'd have company overviews to find out a little bit more information on what the roles are that we offer. You'll also get to experience the culture of the company. We would hopefully, if in person, be able to offer some work shadowing as well, so you can see day to day what our employees get up to. At the end of the Insight Week, we do look to run interviews for our summer internship for the following year. So that is why our Insight Weeks is for first year university students only, because it pipelines into our summer internship program for the following year, where you need to be in your penultimate year of university. So to come on to our summer internship program, as I mentioned, this is for penultimate year students. So either second year of a 3-year course or 3-year of a 4-year course, or if you're doing even longer, then 5-year of a 6-year course. Our summer internship programs are 8 weeks long, and they take place kind of from the end of June to the end of August. Again, we're hopeful that these will now be in person going forward. And when you join our summer internship program, you will be placed into a team where you will take on a full role. You will complete project work that the team that you're working with have assigned to you. You'll also do kind of day-to-day work as well. You'll work on an internship project, give you an opportunity to do some own independent research into the company, and then present that at the end of your internship. And you'll also receive a lot of opportunity throughout the internship for training and development. So many soft skills sessions where you can improve skills like presentation skills, Excel skills, personal brand. And then we will also have kind of lunch and learn sessions where you'll have sessions from the business talking around the business area that they work in, or any kind of hot topics in the industry that will improve your commercial awareness. Our summer internship program is again a pipeline into our graduate program for the following year. So if you are successful during your internship, at the end of your internship, you will be offered a place on the graduate program for the following year. So this is a really great opportunity to get that job offer in, so that when you go back to university for your final year, you've already got that job secured. This is similar for our placement years as well. So our placement years work in a similar way to the summer internship in that they are a pipeline into our graduate program. However, they are a year long, and they are for those who are doing a sandwich year course. So you'll do your 2 years at university, a year out in industry, and then you'll go back for your final year of university. Then our graduate program, this can be dependent on the business area that you're applying to, but they vary between 2 to 3 years. You will join the graduate program on permanent contracts and then roll off into the business once you've completed your program. Again, dependent on the business area that you join, you'll complete a qualification. For more information on these, you can check out our job descriptions for each of the individual programs. You can see which qualification you would be completing. And you would complete that alongside working day-to-day in the office. You do get a lot of support on the graduate program in terms of study days off, buddies, mentors. So again, Jen will be able to talk through that a little bit more for you, but there's a lot of support. And then at the end of the program, you'll have your qualification and a full-time role within the company as well. So that's just really high level on our opportunities. I realised I've got all these slides for you that I could have shown you. But yeah, basically just summing up what I had already said. Internship, the placement year, graduate programs. Our application process, our initial application is an online application where you'll submit your CV and your personal details. You will be then moved through to the next stage of the process if you are able to apply for our program. So our eligibility criteria tends to be on track for a 2-1, right to work in the UK, because we unfortunately. If you are eligible and move through, the next stage is the video interview and gamification. Again, I will touch on these the video interviews slightly in the next slide. The next stage is an assessment centre. This will either be virtual or in person, where you'll complete a number of different tasks with a group of candidates. And then after that stage, it is either an offer or a no offer. So it is a relatively quick application process, I would say, in comparison to some others. But our advice is just always to make sure that you are preparing for each of these stages and really dedicating your time. And I would say, whether you're applying to our company or other companies, it's always good to think about, do you actually want this company or do you just want a job? Because that does tend to come across in your application. It's definitely best to tailor applications and do less of them than kind of mass apply, not put too much effort and thought into it, because then you're always going to be, you know, kind of midway through the pack or towards the bottom. Whereas if you dedicate a little bit of time to things, then you're more likely to hopefully be in that kind of top pick of students for that role. So just to go through video interviews, I'm sure many of you have started doing these now. They've become quite popular among a lot of companies. But how ours work are, it's made up of 5 to 6 interview questions, and you have a set amount of time to complete each question. You will have the opportunity to complete a practice question before, so we do always advise that you do so, just so that you can test your lighting, your sound, make sure you can hear yourself, and make sure that you start to feel a little bit more comfortable in front of the interview. We do say for video interviews, just because they are not in person, please make sure that you are preparing as if it is in person, making sure that you've got examples either noted down next to you or in your head that you know that you can easily pull on. I would also say to dress appropriately, so you don't have to be kind of in full suit and tie, but it's always good to put on something that makes you feel like you are going into either a kind of work or a business environment. I think it gets you in a better frame of mind. All of our video interviews are watched by people, not by machines or AI or anything like that. So please don't worry about that. I know that's a common question that comes up. We do watch all of them, and we listen to the content that you're saying, as well as the way that you are communicating that. Those are key things that we do look for. I know that video interviews can sometimes feel a bit daunting, but I think the thing with these is the more that you practice them, the better you'll tend to get at these. So just make sure that you do use your practice questions, practice on kind of dummy type portals if you can do, so that when you come to do the real thing, you're feeling confident. Just conscious of time, I'm going to move on quickly. So I've just got a slide on in-person assessment centres and then virtual assessment centres, which I'll touch on really quickly. So in-person assessment centres, obviously most commonly used before we hit the pandemic, and I'm sure many companies will be going back to these in the next year or so as well. So just so you're aware, these usually take place in company offices, and these are a good opportunity to have exposure to the work environment and the company culture. So you can't get that so much from a virtual assessment centre. So that is one of the benefits of being able to go in, meet people, get a feel for the office. A couple of tips that we note here is confirming the dress code prior to attendance, so you turn up feeling comfortable. Give yourself enough time to arrive early so that you don't have to rush around and you have some time to compose yourself before the day gets started. If you're given any information prior to the assessment centre, make sure that you read through all of it clearly and see if there's anything that you need to prepare ahead of time. So for example, for us, we do ask for a presentation that you prepare ahead of time. So make sure that you read through the instructions on that and that you come to the assessment centre with that ready to go. A big thing I would say is don't be afraid to bring notes with you. It is perfectly fine to have notes of examples of things you want to ask, as long as you're not just reading off that for your entire interview, because that obviously does look quite obvious, but it's good to be prepared. People want to know that you've put work in and that you're keen to join. So definitely do take notes in if that will make you feel more comfortable. Assessment centres in general tend to be made up of a couple of different tasks. So for example, we have an interview, so this will be with 2 interviewers. We have a presentation, a group task, and then depending on the program you're applying to, you'll also have either maybe a case study or a client meeting or an additional task similar to that. And this will be the case whether the assessment centre is in person or virtual. A couple of things on virtual assessment centres. Again, these have become common over the past year, so you may well have done some of these already. I think it will be a bit of a mix this season in terms of companies using in-person and using virtual. So it's good to know yourself that you feel comfortable going into both situations. Typically, they'll be shorter than an in-person assessment centre, obviously going into the office. So you do lose a little bit of the ability to understand the culture and get a feel for the office. So make sure that you are asking those sorts of questions in your interview so that you can get the information that you need to decide if that is the company and the job for you. Just making sure that your Wi-Fi connection is strong, your microphone's working, your webcam is working, so that you can be ready on the day, not have to worry about technical issues, because I know midway through an assessment centre that can cause a lot of stress and then affect your performance as well. And another point just around dressing, dress as you would for an in-person assessment centre, and that isn't really so much for us. We don't care too much on the appearance of you doing your assessment centre from your bedroom. It is more that it makes you feel better yourself. It makes you feel like you're going into an interview and a better headspace. Just a couple of top tips. You can see these yourself, but just make sure you're doing your research ahead of any interview, virtual or non-virtual. Looking presentable, being on time, enthusiastic, Be specific rather, ask questions and follow up post interview as well, with your recruiters to say thank you, and also with anybody that you had a connection with in the interview and you'd like to ask a little more on. And a couple of don'ts: don't falsify information. So I'm sure you've all heard of people lying on CVs, but you will get questioned on this sort of stuff, and eventually it does normally come out. So just make sure you're honest, but really, do your best to bring out the skills that you have. Don't speak over interviewers, don't rush your answers to questions. And then the key one that I think a lot of people do is allow past rejections to affect their interviews. So what we try and say is go into each interview with a fresh mind. If you go in thinking about previous rejections and how you've performed in previous interviews, it will likely affect the way you perform on the day. So obviously take on board any feedback that you've been given for prior interviews, but go into each new one afresh, so that you can, give the best possible performance on that day. So that's a really quick overview of Mercer, our application process, and a couple of hints and tips. I will hand over to Jen now just to talk a little bit around the Wealth Graduate Programme, how she's found it, her role, her experience, and then we can obviously open up to any questions that we have. So I will stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, Abby. So as I said before, I joined Mercer in the September 2019 graduate intake, and that was the first year of this Mercer Academy that they run now, which basically allows you to see all of the different teams within wealth, where before you would have applied to a particular grad role, be it in funding or investment or DC. Now you get to see a wee bit of everything, which is really useful for your overall development, and then to know which area you actually want to work on later on, because you sort of have an idea coming out of uni, but you don't really know until you're doing the work what you actually enjoy. So as a wealth grad, you'll have some exposure to DB funding. So I work within retirements and pensions, and you'll have exposure to DB funding, which is where your scheme actuaries work, and that's where you're sort of looking at the liability side of pension schemes. And then you also have exposure into the investments, where you're looking at the asset side of pension schemes. You'll also see DC pension schemes, which are your sort of new ones where there's employee and employer contributions, and that's a wee bit of investment and a lot of governance side, and they're very much newer than DB, so there's a lot of new regulations coming, so that there's things changing in those pension schemes all the time. And then you'll have a wee bit of scheme management, which is where that's where you get your first sort of chance to speak to clients, because it's a very client-facing role, and Mercer are very good about building soft skills as well as your technical skills from very early on in the grad scheme. I was going to client meetings from about 5 months into my grad intake, and it's just a great way to build up your own knowledge, because you're hearing consultants speaking to clients, so you're learning how to speak to clients as well as the actual technical things behind it, because you're seeing the papers being made, and you're also building up your own relationship with the clients, so then it's much easier to contact them through email or phone call if you need to later, because you've actually already met them. And then you'll also do a wee bit of risk transfer work, which is where we take the liabilities from a pension scheme and an insurer buys them from the pension scheme to reduce the risk. And that's becoming a bigger part of Mercer's wealth business at the moment, and they're always looking for analysts. So when you come into the wealth, because you'll just work in everything, if there's any opportunity to go for risk transfer work, definitely look at it, because it's an exciting and growing part of the wealth team. But day to day, which is sort of always the bit that you forget, because you see like a list of like what a DB pensions like consultant does and what an investment consultant is, but day to day as an analyst, there's a lot of reporting gets done. You'll pick up a lot of Excel skills. If you don't have them, don't panic about it. You do learn it really quickly on the job. It's good to have, but if you don't, it's something that you'll learn really quickly. There's a lot of reporting, there's a lot of analysis, and you get involved in some really interesting things. So you've obviously got your sort of regular quarterly cycle work, but then there's investment strategies that you can get involved in, funding valuations, and things like that involve a wee bit more, not interesting, where everything's interesting, but it's a wee bit different, and it's a change up to your day. My grad scheme's obviously been a wee bit different to how it had been intended to be, just because of COVID. So I've had 5-6 months in the office, and then we were working from home. But Mercer are really good at making sure that your training continues. So we have, from the minute you start, you'll have weekly Mercer Academy trainings, and these will be from people throughout the UK. Just it could be previous grads or more senior consultants or actuaries, and they basically just talk you through different parts of the job. So that could be internal tools that Mercer use, small things like saving down work into the correct folders, recording your time for clients, or bigger things like asset class training and valuation training and accounting training. And you'll get them weekly, and they're really, really useful. So definitely make sure you attend and ask any questions, and sort of ask any questions at all times. It's the best way to learn. And over Zoom, you'll pick it up so quickly, and you'll get much more comfortable talking in a virtual way if you just pick up the phone or make a Zoom call, or if you're lucky to be in the office when you start, ask the person next to you. They tend to be open plan offices, and there's no hierarchy. You can speak to anybody in the office, and they should be able to help. In terms of the assessment, the assessment centre, when I did it, we had a presentation, and the only things I could say that really helped were make sure that you're remembered. So when I did it, I handed out, it was leaflets to my 2 interviewers, and then so they had something there when I left. And obviously can't all do that now, everyone would have the same, but do something small that will make sure that you're remembered when you leave, because these are the things that will stick with them beyond. Not sure if you want to just move on to questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Jen. So I think Ria got some questions for us.
Yeah, Jen, I'll just quickly go back to you if that's okay. There's one question on what the work-life balance is and what the typical hours you work. Obviously, like you did mention, it is a bit different for you because you did go back in the office and then work from home. But if you could just touch on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah. So most of the time, your work-life balance is pretty good. Yeah. There's also the fact that you're studying for qualifications. So you do have to, you get 4 days in the office or at home, and then a day for studying as you get closer to study time. So then your 4 days you have to fit in work. So you have to sort of manage your own time a wee bit, to make sure that you're getting your study time and you're getting time to yourself. But the majority of your time, it is a very much a 9 to 5, and then you can log off. There are obviously periods where if there's a paper due for a meeting that's run late, or there's a problem that's happened or a client's called, there will be times where you are having to work a wee bit later. or if you've got really busy clients, you might have to work a wee bit later on every so often, but it's not every day. It just is like periodically there'll be busy parts, but you can actually start to plan for them. So particularly within an investment role, every quarter there's a couple of weeks that are your busiest period because you've got quarterly reporting when all your data comes out. So you plan ahead for it, and you've got a couple of quiet months in investment, and then you know that that's going to hit. So then when you do all your funding work, you plan it for all the rest of the time, because funding's very steady. So you can plan your time to make sure that in these busy times you're only looking at the investment, and then you're logging off after that. And they're also very good if you've got an exam coming up, you've got a full client team to rely on, you're not working on your own. You can lean on other people in your team if you've got studying to do, or if you have other things, or you need a wee bit of time, if you're just over capacity. I know everyone says never say no, always say yes, but when you need to say no, and you can pass work on, and people will give you time to study or to meet other needs. It is a very team dynamic in Mercer, and people are really good at picking up when you're busy, or if you aren't busy and you need some extra work, you can take work from your other colleagues. So there are busy periods, as there would be in any job, but most of the time you can maintain a pretty good work-life balance. Well, certainly I have, so yeah.
Perfect, thank you, Jen. And Abby, this one is for you, if that's okay. Firstly, they said, thank you for the presentation. Regarding the interview, what would you recommend would be the best way to demonstrate the interest of working in an applied firm? When answering the question on recent work the firm has been involved in, what information would you particularly mention?
Okay, I'll take the first part. So around showing how you're interested in that particular company. It's a hard one, because it depends on why you are interested in that particular company. If you have a genuine interest to work somewhere, I think you can quite organically answer that question. I think key things to stay away from are facts from the internet. So saying like Mercer is the biggest global consulting company, so I want to work for them. Well, anyone can say that. So anything quite high level like that you've just picked off the internet, it doesn't show your real interest. It shows that you've gone on the website, whatever, tried to find something. I would say things that show a genuine interest, and again, please don't all just use this example because I'm saying it, but if you have a particular interest in ESG, so another word for that is like social impact. So if you're interested in what the company do with sustainability, for example, and you do a lot of stuff yourself, then maybe you would talk about that and saying that, Mercer does X, Y, Z, and you yourself do a number of different things, and you'd like to kind of partner with the company when you start to see how you can get involved, etc. Again, that sort of thing with charity work as well. Our company do a lot with partnering with charities. So, for example, at the moment, we're partnering with Ambitious About Autism, and we do a lot for them in terms of raising money, events, etc. So if that's something that you have a particular interest or passion in, then that's something that may interest you in the role. Then I think when you speak about that, if you are interested in it, that comes across. Obviously, if you have done modules within your degree that you think are really relevant to the program that you're applying to, that could be another thing that sparks your interest and motivation for applying. Again, be wary of the way you use this, but if you know people who work in the industry or in the company and you've had conversations with them, then you can mention that. Or if you've attended events like this, I think, yes, more action. Like if you can say that you've done a number of different things and that has given you interest, it seems more kind of truthful because you've spent time kind of attending events, getting to know the company better, and then making a decision to apply. Rather than, you know, if you mass apply to 50 different companies, it's going to be quite hard to answer that question because you don't even know yourself why you're interested in that company, because the chances are you're probably not, and you just want a job. So I would try and just be careful with when you're applying, making sure you actually do have an interest. And if you get asked that question, you'll be able to demonstrate that in an authentic way. Hopefully that's answered your question. I know it's really long-winded, but
that's good, Abby, thank you. There's another question on how, I don't mind answering this if you want, how long the application process is. If I apply by February 2022, when your program ends, what will guarantee my job offer? So I'm not sure if there was a bit of confusion when Abby sort of explained the application process, but all of our roles are open now. So for example, say if you apply to a role now, the next stage, providing you are eligible, so you have the right to work in the UK, you're on track for a 2-1, etc., you are then invited to a video interview, and you complete your video interview in your own time. Obviously, the sooner the better, because we do hire on a rolling basis. So it is sort of dependent on when you complete that video interview. And then in the coming months, so I think from the end of this year onwards, we will be doing the assessment centres. So what guarantees your job offer is your performance at the assessment centre. So if you've performed well up to that stage, we then offer you a graduate role. That doesn't mean you then start straight away. All graduate roles will start in the September. So just because you applied early doesn't mean that you will then start early. It just means that you've been able to secure a role early, and so you can sort of be stress-free for the rest of your time at university, etc. So hopefully that makes sense, but let me know if it doesn't. There's another question. What kind of opportunities are available for experienced professionals in customer service and account management at senior manager level roles in past employment? So we are only currently advertising graduate internship and placement roles. Sorry, if you wanted sort of senior manager level roles, you'd have to go directly on the website. So we are just early careers recruiters looking at graduate, intern and placement roles. So that is that done. This is a question for Jen. During your training, did you come across infrastructure / project finance, and what is the scope of the field at Mercer?
No, I haven't come across that. I'm very much only working pensions. The closest you would see is an infrastructure fund that your pension fund was invested in. But no, it's not something I've had exposure to.
Thank you. And the deadline for graduate programs. So there's no specific deadline. We hire on a rolling basis. So once the roles are filled and once the assessment centres have been completed, that's when we close the roles. So that's why we do say, if you are interested in the role, to apply as soon as you can, so that you're in with a better chance to be invited to an assessment centre sort of earlier on. Abby, I'll give this to you because I'm about to cough. Can I ask if the video interviews will be competency-based or strength-based?
Yeah, so the video interviews are based on competencies and will often ask for examples of when you've demonstrated certain competencies or how you've acted in a scenario. So those are the sorts of things to prepare for ahead of a video interview. Advice that I often give is to have a couple of key examples of times you worked in a team, things you've achieved, challenges that you've overcome in the workplace or at university. Those kind of standout things that are quite typically asked, and they might be phrased in different ways, but you can always draw back to that example. For example, Ben, if you think about a project that you've worked on and there was a team of you doing it, you, for example, were creating an item, it went wrong. how you overcame it. If you put a note down of that example, you can then use that for a number of different questions you could be asked. You could use it for how you acted in a team. You could use it for how you overcame a problem. You can use it for biggest achievement that you've had. You can use it for a number of different things. So just have some kind of skeleton examples and then draw on those as and when you need, kind of dependent on exactly what the questions are asking you. And to be honest, a lot of companies will have similar sorts of questions in terms of they are likely to be competency based. So you won't need to kind of think up different examples for every company you apply for. You'll just need to tailor them slightly. One thing I would say on that though is we do ask 5 questions at video interview. Don't use the same example for all 5 of those questions. It can be quite boring for the person who is watching the video interview. And also it just looks like you haven't done anything else but that one thing. So try and have at least a couple of those that you can then use.
Perfect, thanks Abby. Jen, this is a question for you. Is there anything you wish you knew before you went through the application process? Which is sort of what Abby's already touched upon, but if there's anything from your side that you wish you knew?
Not really. I would say make sure you have an understanding sort of the types of exams that are offered. So Mercer let you either sit the actuarial, so the IFOA or the CFA. I've opted for the actuarial, and it's not that I regret it, but just you want to have some sort of understanding to sort of explain why that's what you want to do. I didn't really know why I wanted to do it. So just look into that, and it's helpful for picking your career route after. So actuarial lends itself to funding or investment, whereas CFA is really solely towards investment. So if you're not sure what you're going to want to do, actuarial is probably a better route so that you're not as pigeonholed. There is always the option to move about or to progress in funding up to a certain point if you're doing CFA, but if you're not 100% sure, then definitely have a look into it. And you don't need to make the decision right away. There's a couple of exams you'll have to sit when you start the academy, called the IMC exams, and they're sort of the foundation level of your CFA ones, just to show that you've got a sort of fundamental competency to do investment. So you've got to get through them within the first 6 months or so of working in Mercer, and then so you've got a wee bit of time to decide. But probably which exams is a good one to make sure that you know, and then the rest you sort of just learn as you go. Nobody really expects during your assessment centre that you know everything about everything. Do know the difference between DB and DC pensions. That's just a given. Make sure you know that. But apart from that, as long as you've got examples that you can give of times where you've shown skills that aren't necessarily pension related, that's enough. The actual pension knowledge will come later.
Perfect, thank you, Jen. We don't have any more questions in the Q&A box unless anyone wants to put in any final questions. I'll give it a minute or so, but just to remind you that the links to the roles should be in the chat box, as well as our insight days that are coming up as well. So we do have one tomorrow, actually, if anyone is interested. That is the Female Insight Day. We also have a BAME Insight Day coming up, as well as a Pride Insight Day. So that is just a virtual day where there'll be a lot more information with some senior speakers, some graduates, etc. Myself and Abby will be there as well. Obviously, like I said, it is virtual, but just to get a better insight into MMC as a whole rather than just Mercer. So if you are interested, please do sign up. We have also put our email address in the chat box, so earlycareers@mmc.com. So if you did have any specific questions that you wanted to ask, regarding the roles, graduate roles, or whichever roles, then please do send it to that email. I think we've just quickly got another question. A quick question for Jen. How much traveling do you do as part of your role?
At the moment, I travel from my bedroom to the spare room, so very little, but because the Academy for the UK is a sort of UK-wide team, so I've got client teams down, I'm up in Glasgow, and I've got client teams down in Woking and London. So I've been down to London a fair few times just to see the client teams. This was before client meetings, so I've not been down for any client meetings, but I've travelled down there a couple of times. And then your sort of close local offices, so for me that's Edinburgh. We would travel there and back quite regularly for sort of bigger Scotland team meetups. So there'll be ones for England, I imagine, as well, but I can only speak from my own perspective. But you do get the opportunities to travel to meet teams, and it is a really good way to meet your teams when you're national. So obviously you can see people over Zoom and stuff, but if you get the opportunity to speak face to face, it makes future conversations so much easier if you've met the person and you sort of know them to pick up the phone later. So there definitely is some opportunity to travel about different offices.
Perfect, thank you. And sorry, another question for you. Have you encountered derivatives in your work? And how do you suggest a candidate interested in investment management gets familiar? Are there any resources or anything that you recommend?
So I have encountered derivatives a wee bit. I've got some funds that are invested in derivatives, but we are much more investment consultancy than management. So there's not a great deal that we do in terms of sort of managing derivatives. We just report on them. There's a couple of teams that are a wee bit more involved in sort of like the LDI side of pensions, that's your liability driven investments, and they focus a lot more on derivatives. I would expect you to get a lot of training once you join Mercer, if that's the sort of thing you were interested in. I'm not sure how you would go about it before joining, but it's certainly something that once you were in, people would be definitely happy to have you trained on, because that team's it's a really interesting team to get involved in. Actually, it's a good one, and they'll be happy to take analysts.
Perfect, thank you so much, Jen. Is there any other final questions at all? No. Okay, well, as I said, our email is in the chat box. So if you did have any final or other questions that you can think of, please send them to us. But firstly, thank you so much, Abby and Jen, for helping out in this session. It was really insightful, especially that it is 7 p.m. In the evening. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you once again, everyone, for joining.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.